The principles of strength training. Specificity. Specificity is the most important principle of strength training, but it's also the easiest to understand. Technically, specificity means that training should tax and stimulate the underlying systems of the sport task. This means that strength training should start by clearly defining the sport task, or in our case, what exactly you want to get stronger in. For calisthenics, this can mean two things: either getting stronger in basic exercise and progressing to weighted calisthenics, or getting stronger in a specific strength skill. Once you know exactly what you want to get stronger in, you have to structure your training in a way that taxes and stimulates the underlying systems of it. And what are these systems? If you recall from the previous video, strength is made up of 4 parts: muscle size, muscle architecture, neural drive, and technique. The more of these your training hits, the more specific it is. This means that specificity is a spectrum which allows us to categorize training by how specific it is to your goal. On the first level is training that is so non-specific as to significantly harm your performance. For strength, it would be endurance training. On the second level is training that is mostly tangential to performance. For strength, it would be advanced flexibility training. On the third level is training that generally supports performance. For strength, it would be strength endurance or hypertrophy training. And on the fourth level is training that specifically supports performance. For strength, it's basic or maximal strength training. The idea that specificity ranges from narrow specificity, practicing the planche technique, to broad specificity, putting on shoulder and chest size, and even to negative specificity, training for a marathon, lays the foundation for one of the 2 sub-principles of specificity: training modality compatibility. This sub-principle describes a very important observation in strength training. Some forms of training help performance a lot, some less so, some not at all, and some actually hurt performance. But another way, some training modalities are just more compatible with each other. For example, getting more powerful in weightlifting can give you more power to be a sprint swimmer, while gaining a lot of muscle will not help you in marathon training, as your repeated power to weight ratio will fall and your running times will get worse. Since we're talking about strength training here, here's a list of training modalities that interfere with strength training ranked from the most to least interfering: strength and endurance, strength and flexibility, strength and power, strength and hypertrophy, and basic strength and specific strength. Very light cardio sessions aside, strength and endurance are the most interfering training modalities for 4 reasons. The first reason is muscle loss. Since endurance training is catabolic towards muscle tissue, high levels of such training will risk muscle loss if chronically executed. Less muscle means less contractile tissue to produce force, which is a no bueno for strength training. The second reason is fatigue. Since endurance training adds fatigue without improving your performance, it's a net negative. Your body has a finite recovery ability, which is like a glass, and any type of training that fills up this glass without helping you get stronger is useless, to say the least. The third reason is fiber type alterations. The muscle fibers in your body range on a spectrum from fast twitch to slow twitch muscle fibers. Fast twitch fibers produce more force, are bigger, and respond better to strength training than slow twitch fibers, which means that having your muscles be as fast twitch as your genetics will allow is one of the best things you can have if your goal is to get as strong as possible. However, since endurance training tends to shift your muscle fibers into slower twitch ones, this can affect your strength negatively. And the fourth reason is nervous system alterations. When a muscle fiber becomes more slower twitch, the motor unit that controls it also optimizes the slower twitch activity. This wouldn't be that big of a problem if it only happened to local motor units, but since this can alter the nervous system activity at the spinal and even brain level, can make you better at low intensity sustained activity while making you worse at high intensity explosive activity, is definitely not a good thing. In short, endurance and strength training are not compatible whatsoever. Either choose one or try to combine both, not achieving your full potential in either one. Next up is strength and flexibility. Flexibility is defined as the total range of motion a joint or series of joints is capable of operating through, and is derived from 4 factors. The first is muscle flexibility. This is the length of the actual muscle belly and its degree of safe operating and maximal stretching length, which is influenced both by tissue and nervous system limitations. The second is connective tissue flexibility. This is the degree of safe stretching possible by muscle fascia, connective tissue that runs through the muscle belly, tendons, and ligaments. The third is joint flexibility. These are the positions and shapes of various joint structures that can in part determine range of motion at that joint. And the fourth is adjacent tissue interference. This is the point at which limbs will just run into adjacent limbs or other parts of the body, which will limit their range of motion. Training for flexibility in calisthenics can be accomplished in 3 ways: going through the normal range of motion basic exercise such as push-ups, going through an increased range of motion in basic exercise such as deficit push-ups, and doing dedicated stretching outside of training. While the first 2 methods of enhancing flexibility have no negative effects on training because you're training, there is some good evidence to suggest that dedicated stretching can contribute to fatigue and interfere with strength adaptations. Sure, if flexibility is limiting you from doing an exercise or skill, it might be justified to use dedicated flexibility training as a trade-off that is positive on the net balance. But becoming more flexible than is necessary for strength training is likely likely to interfere with best adaptation speeds. There are two other problems with excessive flexibility. The first is that extreme flexibility can compromise joint safety and movement strength. Hyperflexible joints have been shown to be more susceptible to injury. Not only that, extreme flexibility can reduce tissue tightness at the bottom of a movement, such as the rebound in the bottom of a push-up or pull-up, and thus depreciate the effect of the stretch shortening cycle and slightly decrease strength performance. The second issue of flexibility training is that it has been shown to reliably cause temporary decrease in strength and power expression, so flexibility training is most interfering with strength training if done right before it, and is likely the least if done after or in its own time. To conclude, the verdict on flexibility training is as follows. Practice the full range of motion in basic exercise with good technique. Practice an increased range of motion in basic exercise if flexibility is an issue. Use dedicated stretching only when the previous two options have failed, and only get as flexible as needed. Next up is strength and power. Strength is the ability to produce force, while power is the ability to combine a high force output with a high velocity of movement. These training modalities are very similar, but there are some issues with compatibility nonetheless. Firstly, training for power takes time and effort that could have been used for either more strength training, hypertrophy training, recovery, or any number of things that can actually help you get stronger. This is because power training doesn't actually help you get stronger. It just helps you to express the strength that you have as quickly as possible. True power training is loaded at around 30% of your 1 rep max, which is basically nothing compared to the 75% of your 1 rep max that is required by strength training, so it just cannot help you get stronger. And secondly, power output is highly fatigue sensitive, much more than strength. If strength is maximized in the moderate volume range and hypertrophy in the high volume range, power is maximized in the extremely low volume range. This means that power training just cannot be combined with strength training because it will massively limit how much you're able to train. Next up is strength and hypertrophy. While muscle size directly causes strength expression by supplying the literal machinery for muscle contraction, there are several ways in which hypertrophy training can interfere with strength training. Firstly, hypertrophy training is best accomplished in the high volume range. This creates a lot of cumulative fatigue, which converts fiber types, interferes with nervous system function, and literally makes you too tired to present the most overload and perform the best in training. Sure, muscle size is a massive component of strength, so you do need hypertrophy training to get your strongest, but it's much better to separate the two. Build muscle first and strengthen it later. And secondly, training non-specific muscles can directly interfere with your attempts to get your strongest. Sure, some bicep, tricep, or lateral delt training can improve your physique and maybe even strength, but excessive training of these muscles can add fatigue that's not worth the performance trade-off. Not only that, leg training, for example, can make you heavier and calisthenics skills harder, especially lever skills. So building bigger legs if your goal is to get your strongest in calisthenics is definitely not recommended. And the last training modalities are basic strength and specific strength. Basic strength is the ability to exert force using the body's musculature, while specific strength is the ability to express that strength in whatever exercise or skill you want to get stronger in. An illustration of the difference can be between the ability to do heavy weighted pull-ups for 5 reps and an extremely heavy weighted pull-up for 1 rep. One does not automatically equal the other, as you can be really strong at one and not that strong at the other. Why? Oftentimes this is a reflection of technique. At 1 rep max attempts, good technique is rewarded and bad technique can really hold back performance. And on top of that, technique tends to break down the heavier you go, which means that someone can have an impressive level of basic strength, but have problems with technique that impede the best expression of specific strength. Additionally, the best expression of maximal strength occurs in a low volume environment, which drops fatigue, while the best basic strength training occurs in a moderate volume environment. So you can't perform the best basic and specific strength training at the same time. Okay, so does training modality compatibility imply that all of my training should be specific strength training? Not at all. Hypertrophy and basic strength training are crucial for you to get your strongest, so long as they're done at the right times. On the other hand, other training modalities such as power, flexibility, and especially endurance should be kept as minimal as possible, as they add no net benefit, and in some cases could even be a net negative. The second sub-principle of specificity is directed adaptation. While specificity says that you need to train the exact system you want to improve, directed adaptation says the training should follow a planned sequence, not be random or scattered over time. For example, if you want to get your strongest in the planche as fast as possible, you should be practicing the planche just about every week in sequence, nothing else. Not every other week, while also training for handstand push-ups and handstand presses. Why? Firstly, systems have finite adaptation capacities, which means that you cannot progress rapidly in multiple exercises or skills simultaneously, especially if they use the same muscle groups. And secondly, while you can make small adaptations after a single workout, the degree to which they stick around depends on how consistently they were trained. If you train the planche once, you'll lose the adaptations from this workout in a couple of days, but if you train the planche for multiple weeks in a row, you'll retain these adaptations for much longer. To illustrate this, imagine that your goal is to improve your 1 rep max pull-up. According to specificity, the best way to do this is to practice the 1 rep max pull-up. However, you decide that you also want to build some muscle with sets of 10, so every other pull-up workout alternates between the 2 rep ranges. Because your body has limited ability to adapt, this split focus holds you back. The same systems that need specialized for sets of 1 are now being asked to adapt to sets of 10, but some of those adaptations just cannot coexist. Improving at high rep strength endurance means you give up some potential gains in low rep strength. On top of that, since adaptations are sequence dependent, every time you train sets of 10, the progress you've made towards sets of 1 starts shifting in the opposite direction. adaptation, making it less likely that improvements in one rep max strength will stick around long term. Okay, so should I only focus on one exercise or skill and nothing else? Not quite. You can train multiple exercises or skills at once and make meaningful progress in them, especially if they don't involve the same muscle groups. However, if you want to progress as fast as possible in a single exercise or skill, focusing on it and putting everything else on maintenance is a much better strategy. In short, directed adaptation states two things. You can't make the best gains in multiple movements at once, and the gains that stick around the most are the ones you train consistently over time. This means that instead of training everything at once, a better approach is structuring your training in dedicated phases. Firstly, a hypertrophy phase to build muscle. Secondly, a basic strength phase to strengthen that muscle. And thirdly, a specific strength phase to improve your ability to express that strength in your chosen exercise or skill. This way you'll improve multiple characteristics needed for you to get your strongest without training all of them simultaneously. Okay, so now that you know what specificity and its sub-principles mean, let's talk about why it's the first principle of strength training. Specificity is the most important principle because it lends direction to all the other principles. An analogy I like to use is that of a target, pistol, and bullets. The target is your goal, pistol is specificity, and bullets are the rest of the principles. No matter how good your bullets are, if you don't aim your pistol at the target, you're not going to hit it. In much the same way, no matter how perfectly you apply the other principles, if your training is not specific to your goal, it's not going to get you there. As obvious as that may sound, you just cannot get better at pull-ups by training for dips. To show you an illustration from the book, here's how specificity relates to the other principles. It encompasses them. Without specificity, you can't train because you don't know what you're training for. Okay, so now that you know why specificity is so important, let's talk about some implications that it has on your training. Firstly, main exercise selection. Main exercise or exercise you want to get stronger in. If your goal is the front lever, this will be a front lever hold. But if your goal is to get a stronger weighted pull-up, this will be a heavy weighted pull-up. Because of the principle variation, which I'll talk about much later, you don't have to include main exercises in every training cycle. However, you should train them if you want to perform your best for three reasons. The first is muscular and connective tissue adaptations. When you perform any exercise, your body has to produce and resist forces in a very specific way. Gravity pulls down in one direction, and your muscles, tendons, and joints work together to push back in precise patterns. Early in training, you might use a variety of exercises to build muscle, for example, pull-ups and rows to grow your back. But as you approach a period of time where you want to perform your best, what matters most is not just muscle size, but how well your muscles and connective tissues can handle the exact demands of the exercise or skill you want to get your strongest in. Research shows that with consistent practice, both muscles and tendons structurally adapt to the specific lifts you do, even without gaining more muscle mass. This is the muscle architecture part of the strength equation, which means that in the short term, the best way to prepare is to practice the exercise or skill itself. The second is neural adaptations. For muscles to contract, the nervous system has to send a signal, but the way the nervous system is used isn't exactly the same in assistance exercise compared to the main exercises. Even a small difference in technique, like neutral grip pull-up versus supinated grip pull-up, can create different sequences of muscle activation, even if most of the same muscles are involved. This means that the nervous system, and even the brain, adapt specifically to the technique of each movement. Because of this, your chosen exercise or skills aren't just strength tests. There are also sport-specific techniques, and like any other sports skill, the best way to sharpen them is by practicing the exact movement. And the third reason why you should train your chosen exercise or skill before testing your strength in it is to prevent unwanted outcomes, which include injury, lower force production, and technical errors. In short, you have to improve your specific strength to get your strongest. Basic strength alone isn't going to cut it. The second implication of specificity is assistance exercise selection. When we talk about training outside of the main exercises, where specificity is quite obvious, it's important to understand how specificity applies to assistance work. All assistance training should serve one purpose: to make you better at your chosen exercise or skill by either building muscle size or improving movement strength. When building muscle size, only focus on the muscles that matter, which for calisthenics are shoulders, back, chest, and arms. Sure, building bigger legs might improve your physique, but if your goal is to get as strong as possible, it'll only cost you. Since your ability to recover is limited, focusing on your legs means taking energy away from the muscles that really count. And on top of that, bigger legs will just make you heavier, decrease your relative strength, as they're essentially just dead weight. When improving movement strength, train only your weak points. If you can't do the planche because your shoulders aren't strong enough, improve your shoulder strength. But if you can't do the planche because your lower back isn't strong enough, improve your lower back strength. Identify your true limiting factors and address them with targeted assistance exercises. In short, if an assistance exercise doesn't help you build muscle or improve movement strength where it matters, don't do it. Your body has a finite ability to recover, and doing exercises that don't benefit you only takes energy away from those that do. Okay, so now that you understand the implications of specificity and how to properly apply it, let's talk about some of the ways you can underapply it. The first is the most obvious one: training with incompatible modalities outside of strength training. Because your body has a limited capacity to recover and adapt, fact, any physical training outside of strength training has the potential to interfere with performance and progress. Some activities interfere more than others, depending on four main factors. The first is volume of external training. The more training you do outside of strength training, the more it can drain your energy and reduce workout quality. For example, playing tennis twice a week for an hour is minor, but 6 days a week for 2 hours each session could significantly hinder your progress. The second is impact of external training. Low impact activities like yoga or walking have a very small effect, while contact sports like MMA or BJJ create higher stress, minor injuries, and extra recovery demands. The third is modality of external training. Endurance work like marathon running interferes more with strength training than bodybuilding style training because it stresses muscles, energy systems, and the nervous system in ways that are less compatible with maximal strength development. And the fourth is timing of external training. Ideally, external activity should be scheduled far from hard strength training sessions to allow recovery. For example, morning soccer and evening strength training is better than back-to-back sessions. Historically, elite Soviet lifters were often prohibited from any outside activity that could interfere with performance and spent much of the year in training camps. Today, on the other hand, most people do strength training as a hobby, so external activity can be enjoyable and valuable for quality of life. The takeaway is this: use the four factors: volume, impact, modality, and timing to make informed choices about outside physical activity. This helps you enjoy other activities without unnecessarily compromising your strength performance. The second way you can apply the principle of specificity is by using non-specific general physical preparedness work. This is training that gets you in good enough overall shape to benefit fully from the more specific training that follows, which for strength training means two things: building the muscle mass and developing work capacity. In strength training, this is accomplished through a hypertrophy phase, where the most important muscles are trained in the 5 to 10 rep range with higher volumes. This not only builds muscle mass, which is a crucial component of strength, but also improves work capacity to handle the upcoming strength-focused phase. Okay, but where do things like kettlebell swings, sled pushes, burpees, or random circuit training fit into GPP for bodyweight strength training? Nowhere. These methods can build general fitness, but they're not specific to the muscle groups and movement patterns needed for bodyweight strength training, nor are they overloading enough to maximize progress. This is why beginners should start with the basics: push-ups, pull-ups, dips, and rows, as they're incredible for building muscle and developing work capacity. The third way you can apply specificity is by simply not focusing on it when creating a program. Every choice you make in programming should clearly and directly address at least one of the following areas: muscle size of the muscles that matter for strength, strength in the movements that matter, peaking or preparing for max performance at the right time, technique in the exact strength skills, recovery and adaptation, and injury management and prevention. The takeaway is simple: every exercise and rep range in your program should have a clear reason behind it. If you can't explain why you're doing something in a quick, straightforward way, it's probably not specific enough to be worth keeping. This is not about just keeping training simple, it's about keeping it relevant. And the fourth way you can apply specificity is by training for too many goals at once. If you're just getting into calisthenics, you might want to achieve the muscle up, front lever, one arm pull up, handstand push up, planche, human flag, and any other skill that comes into your mind. This is perfectly fine. However, problems arise when you think that you should work on all of these skills simultaneously. As we discussed in a section about directed adaptation, your body has a finite ability to adapt. If you throw everything at your body at once, it just gets confused as it doesn't know what it needs to adapt to. On top of that, since your body also has a finite ability to recover, it cannot recover from the amount of training that has to be done to improve at all of these skills at once. This is why working on one, maybe 2 skills at once is a much better strategy, as you get to centralize your focus and not overload your body's recovery ability. Okay, but won't I lose these skills if I shift my focus to something else? No, at least not if you do a few sets per week to maintain them. This is the beauty of this approach. Maintaining a level is 10 times easier than achieving it. So once you achieve your desired level, you can easily maintain it while shifting your focus to something else. If it took you 20 sets per week to achieve your current level in any skill, it may only take you 3 or 4 to maintain it. Okay, so now that you know how you can apply specificity, let's talk about some of the ways in which you can apply it. The first is doing maximal strength training indefinitely, or in other words, always staying below 3 reps. At first glance, this might seem logical, but it actually violates several key training principles and runs into 4 major problems when it comes to specificity. The first is staleness. If the body is exposed to the same stimulus over long periods, the adaptations it produces gradually decrease. In other words, repeating the same type of training too long makes it less effective, which is why the principle of variation exists. The second is missing out on hypertrophy. Strength doesn't just come from better neural efficiency, it also comes from bigger muscles. Most athletes, especially taller ones, need years of muscle gains to maximize their leverage and strength potential, but doing maximal strength training all the time makes it nearly impossible to get the volumes required for growth. Sure, heavy weights build muscle to a point, but once you're doing 3 reps or less, fatigue skyrockets and volume drops, and without enough volume, hypertrophy lags behind. Trying to do both maximal strength and hypertrophy training in the same session usually results in mediocrity. Maximal strength training limits how much volume you can do, while hypertrophy work blunts the recovery neural adaptations needed for maximal strength. The smarter approach is phasing, focusing on hypertrophy in one block and strength in the other, instead of splitting attention and progress. And the third is missing out on basic strength. Paradoxically, always doing maximal strength training isn't the best way to build maximal strength. Lasting strength gains need both sufficient load and enough total volume to drive adaptation, and training in the 3 to 6 rep range usually hits the sweet spot, heavy enough to build strength, but light enough to accumulate the necessary volume. Constant maximal strength training, on the other hand, produces fatigue out of proportion to the gains it delivers, draining your recovery and leaving less room to build a strong foundation. In short, strength is built in the 3 to 6 rep range, but revealed in the 1 to 3 rep range. The second way you can over-apply specificity is by having a very low exercise variation. Just like limiting rep range so only 1 to 3 can slow progress, restricting exercise selection too much can also reduce potential benefits. Varying exercise provides 2 big advantages. The first is variation for its own sake. When you repeat the same exercise for too long, your body adapts less and progress slows. This is a phenomenon called adaptive staleness. Introducing new exercise breaks the stagnation simply by giving your body something different to adapt to. As long as the chosen exercise is challenging enough, specific enough, and not needlessly fatiguing, it can drive new progress. For example, after several training cycles of pronated grip pull-ups, switching to supinated grip pull-ups can lead to more growth in strength than staying with the same pronated pull-ups. Later, when you return to the pronated grip pull-up, the movement will feel fresh again, and your performance will often be better than before. This back and forth swapping, cycling exercise in and out, is one of the most effective ways to keep progress moving. And the second advantage of varying exercise is directed variation. Instead of variation for its own sake, which prevents staleness, directed variation is used to target weak points. If your goal is the front lever but your weak point is raw pulling strength, endless front lever holds are not going to help you. Dynamic exercise are much better for building strength, so you should incorporate front lever raises or weighted pull-ups. In short, your training doesn't always have to look like the goal exercise or skill and nothing else. Variation can be beneficial to avoid staleness and adjust weak points. And the third way you can over-apply specificity is by choosing assistance exercises that are too similar to the main ones. In strength training, assistance work should give you a new and targeted stimulus, not just replicate the main exercise with tiny changes. To be effective, assistance exercise must challenge weak points, help you build strength or muscle where you're lacking, and be different enough from the main exercise to actually create variation, because if they don't, you won't get the benefits of novelty and directed adaptation. For example, if you're doing half-lap planche holds and decide to add advanced leg planche holds as an accessory exercise, you're making this mistake. Both exercises are isometric planche holds, and even though they're different in intensity, they're not fundamentally different enough to be used simultaneously. Instead, a better alternative is using planche presses or handstand push-ups as assistance exercises, as this way actually give your body something new to adapt to. In short, your assistance work should not be a clone of the main exercise or skill. It should look different enough to target your weak links more directly and provide a new stimulus to keep progress moving. Okay, so now that you know basically everything there is to know about specificity and how it relates to strength training, here's a quick summary of everything we talked about. For strength training, specificity doesn't mean you should only ever do the skill or exercise you want to get stronger in. It does mean, however, that all of your training should directly contribute to improving your performance by either building muscles that matter or developing strength in the movement patterns that matter, leaving almost no room for unrelated work. Okay, but how can I apply all of this? Firstly, build muscle. Since muscle size is a huge part of the strength equation, you need to build at least some muscle to get your strongest, as muscle architecture, neural drive, and technique can only take you so far. If you're a complete beginner, I would advise you to watch my starting calisthenics series and follow it for at least 6 months before getting into any kind of strength training. Secondly, pick an exercise or skill you want to become stronger in. This is crucial because strength is movement specific, and until you know which movement you want to strengthen, you can't train. In my opinion, the best approach is to pick one pushing and one pulling goal, as training for more goals at once will just dilute your focus. Thirdly, choose the main exercise for your training program. If your goal is the planche, this will be a planche progression hold, but if your goal is the handstand push-up, this will be a pike push-up or handstand push-up against the wall. The main exercise should be as specific to your goal as possible. Fourthly, choose assistance exercise for your training program. These should strengthen the weak points that prevent you from doing your goal exercise or skill right now. If your goal is the planche but you don't have enough pushing strength, these will be planche presses, dumbbell planche presses, or handstand push-ups. But if your goal is the handstand push-up but your balance sucks, these will be handstand and bent arm handstand holds. And fifthly, avoid non-specific training. Any type of training that doesn't help you get stronger is wasted time and effort, which could be spent on more specific training or recovering from said training. Sure, if you love to play basketball, by all means play it, but don't overdo it. 2 hours of basketball every week is likely not gonna hurt you, but 10? Most definitely. Okay, so now that we've covered the principle of specificity, I'd like to say thank you for watching until the end. This was a long video, but understanding the principle of specificity is extremely important if you wish to get your strongest. This is why I even decided to make this video series. Sure, it's gonna take a lot of time and effort to complete it, but since I'm learning much more about these principles by actually making videos about them, it's definitely worth it, even if these videos don't get any views. At least I can say that I learned something, and I hope you did too. The next video will be about the second principle of strength training, overload, so see you then. Peace!